It was a warm evening in downtown Arlington, the vibrant streets alive with chatter as people swiftly moved in and out of cafes and shops. Elijah Grant, a decorated Navy SEAL on leave, strolled leisurely down the sidewalk. He was dressed in a simple grey t-shirt, well-fitted jeans and sneakers, with a leather messenger bag casually slung over his shoulder. He was heading to a local bookstore, eager to finally pick up a novel he had been wanting to read for the first time in months. His mind felt relaxed until the unmistakable wail of a police siren pierced the air, drawing his attention. As Elijah crossed the intersection, he noticed a white police officer, Officer Carden, stepping out of a police car with an air of authority, his sharp blue eyes scanning Elijah as if sizing him up. "Hey, you!" Carden barked, his voice slicing sharply through the buzz of the street. Elijah paused mid-step, turning to meet his gaze. "You're in a bit of a hurry, aren't you?" Carden continued, suspicion oozing from his tone. "Mind telling me where you're headed?" Elijah remained calm, sensing the tension in the few pedestrians who had slowed their pace. He tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. "Just heading to the bookstore," he replied evenly. Carden crossed his arms, a smirk curling his lips. "Bookstore, huh? What's in that bag? Carrying anything I should know about?" The implication of wrongdoing hung heavy in the air, almost tangible. Elijah felt the weight of the scrutinizing stares around him, sensing the prejudice behind the officer's challenge, but instead of anger or frustration, a flicker of quiet confidence ignited within him. "You want to check?" Elijah suggested, an edge of challenge creeping into his steady voice. Caught off guard by the unexpected response, Carden straightened his posture. "I'll be the one asking questions," he snapped, his bravado faltering slightly as Elijah stood firm, unyielding. The crowd began to thicken, curiosity evident in their expressions as more people stopped, discreetly pulling out their phones to capture the unfolding tension. "All right, officer," Elijah spoke up again, his tone calm and authoritative. "Let's do this the right way." As the crowd leaned in, the air crackled with anticipation, Elijah's confidence unnerving Carden. The officer took a step closer, his boots clanking against the pavement, demanding, "Drop the bag." His tone was harsher now, a desperate attempt to regain control. Elijah remained still, his expression undeterred. "Sure," he said slowly, carefully removing the bag from his shoulder and offering it to Carden. This calmness wasn't submission, it was strategy. Carden snatched the bag from Elijah's hands and began rummaging through it. Elijah's gaze remained steady, the absence of fear in his dark eyes replaced by a quiet power that seemed to unsettle Carden. "Hands behind your back," Carden barked, reaching for the cuffs on his belt. "Am I under arrest?" Elijah asked, his voice steady, refusing to let fear creep in. "You're being detained," Carden countered, partially avoiding the question. "You fit the description of someone we're looking for." The absurdity of the statement hung in the air, drawing incredulous looks from the onlookers. Elijah simply nodded, a faint, almost imperceptible smile creeping onto his lips. "All right, Officer Carden, let me help you out," he said, moving closer but still deliberate in his movements. Carden stiffened, his hand hovering near his holstered weapon. "Stay right there." Elijah halted, raising his hands slightly in a gesture of peace. "I'm just giving you my ID." He slowly reached into his back pocket, extracting a small, sleek card holder. He pulled out his military ID, handing it over with calm authority. Carden hesitated, glancing down at the card. His smirk faltered as he processed the name, rank, and the words United States Navy SEAL emblazoned across the top. "You still think I fit the description?" Elijah asked, amusement edging his voice. The crowd leaned in closer, clearly intrigued by the shift in dynamics. Carden, now visibly flustered, clenched his jaw and tossed the ID back at Elijah. "This doesn't mean you're above suspicion," he muttered, desperation filtering into his tone. "Stay put while I check your bag," he ordered. Elijah crossed his arms, a playful smile resting on his lips as he let the officer dig his own grave. He said nothing, but the look in his eyes was a challenge. As Carden continued rummaging through the bag, Elijah's calm demeanor morphed into a presence of quiet confidence, almost theatrical in its display. "Make sure to show everyone what you find," Elijah remarked, gesturing to the growing audience. The tension surged as Carden crouched, pulling open the bag. Inside, the contents lay arranged meticulously. A neatly folded book, a stainless steel water bottle, and a sleek black laptop. Carden hesitated momentarily, his fingers grazing the book before he pulled it out as if it were contraband. "What's this?" Carden demanded, holding the book up. The title, "Leadership Under Pressure, ACL's Guide to Resilience and Excellence," was emblazoned across the cover. The irony was lost on Carden, but not the murmuring crowd. Elijah's calm expression didn't waver. "That's a book I wrote," he replied evenly, a trace of amusement breaking through. "You wrote this?" Carden repeated, momentarily taken aback by the revelation. "That's what I said," Elijah replied, tilting his head. "You want me to autograph it for you, or are you just planning to keep rummaging through my things?" Laughter rippled through the crowd, and Carden's face flushed red, clearly attempting to regain his authority. "Cut the attitude," he snapped offensively. "This isn't over." Elijah raised his hands in mock surrender. "Hey, you're the one making a scene," he remarked, his voice calm but filled with an edge that conveyed he was far from intimidated. "I'm just trying to go about my day." Carden ignored Elijah's comments, continuing to rifle through the bag, pulling out the laptop next, inspecting it as if expecting to find something incriminating. When that failed, he set it aside and moved to the final item, a small leather-bound journal. As he flipped through the pages, his eyes narrowed at an entry that read, "You don't fight for recognition, you fight because it's the right thing to do. Leadership isn't about power, it's about service." Carden froze at those words, clearly resonating with him on some level, however unwilling he was to admit it. The crowd, now more restless, began muttering in frustration. "Anything illegal in there, officer?" Elijah asked, his tone polite but edged with quiet challenge. Carden slammed the journal shut and shoved it back into the bag. "You're free to go," he muttered, stepping back as if to reclaim his lost authority. Elijah didn't budge. Instead, he crossed his arms and raised an eyebrow. "Not so fast," he said, the command in his voice unmistakable. "You stopped me, accused me of fitting a description, rifled through my personal belongings in front of all these people. I think we're owed an explanation." The crowd erupted in agreement, voices calling out phrases like, "What's the reason?" and "You can't just walk away from this." The weight of public scrutiny was palpable, and Carden, now visibly rattled, looked among the crowd as the tide turned against him. Elijah's presence loomed larger, even as Carden's composure eroded under the collective gaze. Finally, Elijah locked eyes with Carden, the silence stretching out between them like a taut bowstring. "Are you not going to answer?" Elijah prompted, his voice rising to be heard above the murmurs. "What's this description I supposedly fit?" Carden opened his mouth, but no words came. The truth was glaringly obvious to everyone. There had never been a description, just an excuse cloaked in prejudice. "Let me guess," Elijah continued, his tone sharp. "A black man walking down the street, minding his own business. That about sums it up, doesn't it?" Gasps rippled through the crowd as murmurs of agreement filled the air. Carden's jaw clenched, but he remained silent, realization dawning that Elijah had turned the tables on him. Elijah pressed on. "What you just did wasn't about keeping the street safe. It was about power. You thought you could humiliate me, intimidate me, maybe even escalate this into something worse. But you didn't expect me to stay calm, did you? Cardin's face flushed crimson, his bravado evaporating. You didn't expect me to be a navius Yale. Elijah continued, his voice steady, cutting through the air. You didn't expect me to have the discipline to remain level-headed or the experience to see through your game. The crowd leaned in, some softly cheering, others nodding in agreement. This isn't just about me, Elijah declared to the audience, his voice rising with authority. It's about the countless times this happens to people who don't have a camera watching, who don't have the training or the platform to push back. This isn't justice, it's harassment, and it needs to stop. The crowd erupted in applause, their support reverberating through the streets. Fumbling for words, Cardin attempted to regain control as he stammered, I was just doing my job. Elijah turned back to him, disappointment etched on his face. If this is how you define your job, maybe you're not cut out for it, he said simply. The words hit Cardin with the force of a slap, igniting a renewed roar of agreement from the crowd, calling for accountability. Elijah pulled out his phone, holding it up. Here's the deal, officer. You're going to stand here in front of all these people and explain why you stopped me, he declared, letting the implication linger. Cardin's eyes widened, realizing Elijah had been recording the entire interaction. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. You don't owe me an apology, Elijah continued, the chaos swirling around them. You owe every single person here an explanation for why you thought you could abuse your power. So go ahead, talk. The crowd fell silent, anticipation crackling in the air as they awaited Cardin's response. His face turned pale, the earlier arrogance stripped away, replaced by palpable fear. He shifted on his feet, panicking under the heaviness of the moment, the weight of public scrutiny suffocating him. I was acting on suspicion, Cardin stammered, desperation bleeding into his voice. Just doing my duty, trying to ensure public safety. Frustrated groans coursed through the onlookers. What suspicion? Someone yelled, voicing the collective disbelief. Elijah continued pressing, let me make this clear, officer. Suspicion is not a license to harass. It's not an excuse to stop someone without cause, and it's certainly not justification for targeting someone because of the color of their skin. Cardin opened his mouth once more to respond, but Elijah raised a hand, silencing him. The crowd applauded softly, buoyed by Elijah's authority. You want to talk about suspicion? Elijah said, stepping closer. What about the fact that you didn't ask anyone else on this street where they were going? What about the fact that you singled me out and rifled through my belongings, trying to paint me as a threat, all without any evidence? Cardin turned red, struggling under the intensity of Elijah's accusations. I wasn't singling you out, he sputtered, though his voice lacked conviction. Weren't you? Elijah shot back, rising with indignation, because I don't see anyone else here getting stopped. Or are you going to tell us all that they fit the same vague description you mentioned? The crowd erupted, voices rising in support. Cardin was clearly cornered, his earlier bravado crumbling away under the watchful eyes of the crowd. Elijah lowered his voice, his tone now soft but unyielding. Here's the truth, Officer Cardin. You didn't expect me to push back. You thought you could get away with this because you've done it before. Probably more times than you can count. But not today. Today, you picked the wrong person. The crowd surged with energy, unified in their support for Elijah and his stance against the abuse of power.